Caesar, my God, are countless, and exceedingly plenteous are your compassions. All the raindrops are counted by you, and the sand of the sea is before your eyes. How much more are they?
Coronadiary for Wednesday the 25th of March 2020. In difficult times, people often try to be stoic, or they expect others to be stoic. What does that mean? So nowadays, when we speak of someone being stoic, we usually think of putting on a tough exterior, looking as though nothing can upset you. But that's actually not exactly what originally the word stoic meant. Of course, Stoicism was a kind or a school of ancient Greek philosophy. And one of the wonderful blessings I had in preparing and teaching a unit on ancient philosophy at St. Cyril's Theological College a couple of years ago was to be able to dive into these ideas of Stoicism. So they had some really interesting ideas that can actually be very similar to Christian ideas. And in fact, some of the church fathers used their language and their concepts to express the Christian gospel. One of the really interesting ideas they had was this idea of things that are up to me. In Greek, the ephemein. There are some things that you can control, and there are other things that you just can't control. And it's important to know the difference. Because if you try to control things beyond your control, you will end up living a life of disappointment and frustration, and maybe even anxiety and sadness as well. So we have to learn the difference between the things we can and can't control, and learn how to let go of the stuff you can do nothing about, while of course doing whatever you can about the things that are actually under your control. And one of the ways that they play this out is that they say, look, most of the stuff in the world is beyond your control. You can't control how other people behave, or how accidents happen or don't happen, or how people treat you, or diseases, or any of those things. But what you do have a lot more control about is your inner world, your character, your personality, the kind of person that you are. So a lot of people say, I want to find peace. I want to be peaceful. And they think that the way to do that is to manipulate the world outside them, to try and make it what they want it to be. And when everything's working the way I want it to be, then I will be peaceful. But in fact, that's the wrong way to look at it, because you can't control a lot of things out there in the world. Peace is found inside you, not by changing what is outside. So as we go through this pandemic, and in fact, if you ever get sick, or if you're going through some kind of a disaster, or lost your job, or whatever, we usually think, oh, this is terrible, this is awful. Well, St. John Chrysostom, who was the Patriarch of Constantinople and lived around 400 AD, he went through some really difficult stuff. He ended up actually being exiled, removed from his position and exiled, and he ended up dying not long after in exile. But during his exile, or on his way there, he wrote this beautiful letter to a lovely lady servant who was his friend, called Olympias. And she was complaining to him and saying, oh, this is terrible. What has happened to you is awful and terrible. It's a disaster. Listen to what St. John Chrysostom says. For there is only one thing, Olympias, which is really terrible, only one real trial, and that is sin. And I have never ceased continually harping upon this theme. But as for all other things, plots, enmities, frauds, calumnies, insults, accusations, confiscation, exile, the keen sword of the enemy, the peril of the deep, the warfare of the whole world, or anything else you like to name, they are but idle tales. For whatever the nature of these things may be, they are transitory and perishable, and operate in a mortal body without doing any injury to the vigilant soul. Nothing, in other words, can harm your soul except you. He wrote another beautiful essay called "No One Can Harm the Man Who Does Not Harm Himself." The problem often is not the problem. The reaction is the problem. Sorry, that sounds very confusing. What I mean to say is, what we think is the problem, the stuff that's happening out there, is not the real problem. That's not the thing that really harms us. What really harms us is the way that we react to that problem. So these days are a great opportunity to try and develop this kind of stoic, truly stoic attitude towards difficulties in life. And these can help us well beyond the days of pandemic. We try to be like Christ, who cared most about being Christ in the world, being love in the world, rather than making the world be what he wanted it to be by force. Instead, he was just truth in the flesh. He was God in the flesh. And we find a very similar idea in the first century Stoic philosopher Epictetus. Now remember, he's not a Christian, so his idea of God is a little bit different to the Christian idea, but this little quote is actually very, very harmonious with our Christian ideals and actually reminds me of both Jesus and of St. Paul and of many other Christians. He wrote in his discourses, "That is how I'd like to show myself to you, faithful, modest, noble-minded, imperturbable. What? And immortal too? And eternally young and immune from disease? No, but as one who can die in a godlike way, who can endure disease in a godlike way. That lies in my power. That I can do. But the rest is not in my power, nor can I do it." So here's a lovely example of how to put this into practice. On this little diagram, you can see the things outside the circle are the things you cannot control. So you need to let go of those things. Things like whether other people follow the rules, what other people do, how long it's going to last. There's nothing you can do about those things. So fretting about them helps no one. On the other hand, the things inside the circle are the things that you actually can control and therefore should care about and invest your time in. Things like your own behavior and your own kindness and your positive attitude and so on. You can't control most of what happens in the world around you, but you can control the world inside you. So that is the thing that we ought to care about and invest our time and effort into. Here's one more thing you should care about. Join me tomorrow when I'll see you once again. God bless.
Your mercies, O my God, are countless, and exceedingly plenteous are your compassions. All the raindrops are counted by you, and the sand of the sea is before your eyes. How much more are the sins of my soul manifest before you, O my Lord? Sins that I have committed, do not remember, my Lord, and do not count my iniquity. For you have chosen the publican, and the adulteress you have saved, and the right-hand thief, my Lord, you have remembered. And I to the sinner, teach me, O my Lord, to offer repentance. For you do not desire the death of a sinner, but rather that he returns, and that his soul may live. Restore us, O God, to your salvation, and deal with us according to your goodness. For you are good and merciful, mercy upon us according to your great mercy. Remember those, O Christ our Master, be among us and proclaim and say, my peace I give to you, the peace of my Father I leave with you. O King of peace, grant us your peace, establish for us your peace, and forgive us our sins. Disperse the enemies of the church, and fortify her that she may not be shaken forever. Emmanuel, our God, is now in our midst with the glory of his Father and the Holy Spirit. May he bless us all and purify our heart and heal the sicknesses of our souls and bodies. We worship you, O Christ, with your good Father and the Holy Spirit, for you have come and saved us.